We're getting into a conversation about diversity and inclusivity this morning in our partnership ongoing with Uraia. Our guest for this hour already seated, Purity Jebor, has been with us before. Thank you for being here once again. An advocate for gender justice and youth rights, as well as Joyce Atieno, who is an anthropologist and diversity champion. Ladies, thanks for being here this morning. We're having conversations about diversity and inclusivity in governance. It's deep stuff. We're getting into it, but let's just, bring you into the room and ginger you up a little bit. CT has a proverb, and you know what you need to do with that, don't you? Tell us the proverb, and then you can tell us what it means to you and how you would interpret that.
Our proverbs for the whole of this week have been from the island republic of Cabo Verde, otherwise known as Cape Verde by some. Yes, a former Portuguese colony. I know it perfectly. Prevents the wasp from learning to make honey.
Atieno has looked at you and she's saying, what do you know perfectly? She has not realized that is actually the proverb.
Yes, that's how the proverb begins. With a quote, I know it perfectly. I know it perfectly. We're saying, that prevents the wasp from learning to make honey.
Okay, as Atieno mulls over it, Purity, what do you think that the Cabo Verdeans are saying here?
It's a blockering mindset. You are all knowing, so you are the experts. You are not open to new learning that will even make you better. Yep.
What about you, Joyce?
It's about having the know-it-all attitude. And we all know that no one has the monopoly of knowledge. We need other people to, give us some of the information that we don't know yet. So you can't know it all. We need to give other people a chance to learn from them. Yes.
Interesting. And those perhaps who've taken a minute to learn are actually doing it better than you would if you had.
True.
Oh. Okay. So diversity and inclusivity in governance, that's very interesting because we're getting to a place whereby perhaps in the next couple of days we will hear about a new cabinet in government. Perhaps we will hear about appointments changing. And as all of that is happening, it's necessary to have the diversity and inclusivity conversation. But then these are sometimes big buzzwords that we use, isn't it, when we talk about governance? So let's just break it down a little bit from the very beginning. Diversity and inclusivity, what are we talking about?
I'll talk about diversity and then Purity can talk about inclusivity. Now, diversity is including all or various demographics in this situation. We want to see everyone represented. In a society, we have different kinds of people. Look at gender. We have men, we have women, we have people who are young and old. Now, diversity is about looking at all the demographics being represented in this scenario.
And inclusivity?
Inclusivity now goes beyond diversity. Yes, diversity, you're going broader. But to what extent are you also broadening the scope? So inclusivity is ensuring that those people who are marginalized, vulnerable, are the special populations are part and parcel of your process. And these it could be you're also more inclusive. You're also ensuring that the gender representation is also adhered to. You can also go beyond looking at the regional balancing, even as we talk about the coming weeks, as in the regional balance, and also you are also looking at the projection in the coming years. Are you now also ensuring that you're putting in place measures and mechanisms that will also ensure the future generation are also included in your decisions?
Okay. Is it possible to have a combination of both diversity and inclusivity in government in Kenya today?
It is possible. The 2010 Constitution says that no one, I think in the I think that is the Article 27 says that each and every person should be included or shall be included no matter their race, age, gender, marital status, and all that. So if it's in the Constitution, that means that this is something that is possible. We have Article 54 talking about people with disabilities, and also Article 55 talking about the youth. So the mere fact that we have this in the Constitution means that it is something that we can achieve, but we have been ignoring it for quite a while. So we need to start advocating for policies that will ensure that such matters have been addressed. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that we have these policies, but there's a difference between, there's a gap between policies and I usually say what's on the ground. Now, how can we integrate policies and programs to, again, reflect what we want as a society?
Do you think government should be made up of people because of where they're from and their age, or made up of people who know what they're doing?
I think both. Yeah, for instance, I come from a very marginalized community in the country. Mm-hmm. It's part of the Kalenjin Terik. We are 23,000 based on the 2019 census report.
23,000 in total.
In total.
I think there are 23,000 people currently walking on Mombasa Road.
So you can imagine that is my entire community. But it's possible, but also not possible, because also you're looking around the threshold. How many people are supposed to be onboarded? Like the CS's position, the discussion is around maximum of this number, but again, based on what you want to have on board, you cannot have everyone based on their ethnic and also the regional balancing. You cannot. So to what extent are you also going, the government might be able to create opportunities to ensure that those who are not included at this particular positions or even this space are part and now as in the priority into those alternatives. So it's kind of 50-50 a catch situation, but you must also need to get people who really know what they're doing. Because at times you might wish to have this person from this particular community, but this person really don't understand what that that position is all about. So you have to make a strike. But based on what are the practices of the country, we've seen the political big wins are the ones who are always the priority. But based on the Kenyan situation, we always say that they don't know what they are doing, but they have also not been able to demonstrate their ability. So you need to balance both.
I would also like to add to that, it's not just about representation, but meaningful representation. It's okay, you're being represented, but what exactly are you bringing to the table? And I believe that all demographics are have the capacity to bring something. Yes.
This something that we keep speaking of was not possible to itemize or even to recognize before the creation of the county governments. Because county governments are representative of the communities who come from that particular region. Now, do we see what we are saying? Has it been put in practice within the county governments? Do we see it? The answer is no.
True.
What you see is cronyism. You see people selecting people who come from their little enclave. Now, what we see tells us something. What does it tell us about how we perceive leadership and how it is that we manage leadership and power when we're in a position to actually have both at our disposal?
What's based on what's the current discussion, the Gen Z's discussion, who say that they're leaderless, they're tribeless. That is where we need to start from, because I think the moment I place myself to this particular tribe or this particular region, then I'll have that blockage from your proverb that I know my community better and I know what they can do, and there's surety that your community is going to provide shield in case of anything. But the place where we are at, looking at the future generation, and also not the future, but the current generation who are trying to amend or even influence how the future will look like, being tribeless. It is okay to be tribeless, but you must have your cultural origin. But if you're tribeless, you're going to be more inclusive, because again, you'll not be looking at Joyce coming from this place, and you're not coming from this place. You'll actually be open-minded, and you'll go beyond and look at the capability of the different individuals.
Okay, so what we're saying is that then it's actually possible to have, because it's right front and center in what is currently happening in the country, isn't it? That there will be, and we can take it at the highest level in this case, where a cabinet is being formed, that it is actually possible to have a cabinet that is inclusive and that it is diverse in its selection, but that it is also based on merit and not necessarily political rewarding. Joyce?
True. And what takes us back mostly is usually the stereotypes. We are a stereotypical, also a patriarchal society where we feel like there are a certain demographic men who are better at this thing compared to women. I keep talking about this research we did last year, and we saw a lot of these issues being revealed. There are men who feel like a woman cannot lead because naturally our hormones, look at our hormones, sometimes you're moody, sometimes you're unable to perform certain tasks, and based on that alone, it usually takes us back. Look at the women who undergo FGM. That already has separated them from the male counterparts. So this stereotype about the certain demographics that are unable to perform is what we should start by addressing.
How do we address those? How do we get to the point whereby it's stereotypical in nature, but it's been around for a very long time? How do you start to drop biases? I mean, you're an anthropologist, studies human behavior. How do you drop biases that have been there for a very long time and say that if we're heading towards a diversified and inclusive governance system, but that is heavily influenced already by biases, how do you drop those to get to point B?
Now, from an anthropological point of view, civic education is very important. A lot of people lack the knowledge that they require. And a lot of civic education is generic. This is the kind of thing that should be done based on the social status of these people, trying to, materialize it or making it in a way that you are targeting each and every person. Now, men are different from women. So the kind of civic education that goes to men is not the one that we expect to go to women. There should be some, tweaks here and there so that each and every person is targeted and we avoid the generic mode of knowledge transfer.
When you talk about, we talked about diversity, okay? If you look at mankind, we don't even need to define it. Mankind represents diversity, whether it's through our languages or let's say through our culture. And just, even if you share our culture, just the individualism that we all exhibit and the way in which we do things. But so what is this thing that we must learn? How then should we relate to our own specific and unique qualities and that of others, especially when they differ from ours completely? Because the discussion around diversity often centers on how people are socialized. Because if you take somebody from any community or any tribe in this country and from the time they are born in that community, take them to a completely different community, the socialization, they will behave in the same manner as those other people whom. So, whatever you consider to be the traits that define you are learned. There's nothing genetic about it. They are learned. There are things over time you learn. How do we know this? Because when you then move, let's say, from the community that you were birthed in and into a more diverse community, say like in an urban area, you find ways of adjusting. And that process of adjusting, in my opinion, has been, now that's what makes you now a better person, because you've learned to accommodate things that are different. Now, the intolerance that comes in with people, especially when groupings think that for some reason or the other they are better than others, or they feel others should not be entitled to anything better than what they currently have. Now, again, those are human biases that are learned. Let me ask the question. Look at this country and look at how it is. We have a system that was supposed to help cure this thing that we're talking about as a problem, the county government. What has the national government done to ensure that this thing actually works? The national government seems to be at every turn, from the Uhuru government to this one. As much as they possibly can, they have participated deliberately in delaying the progress that will come to the counties. Funds that are meant for the county. Let me just ask the question. Why is it that governors have to keep begging for this money? It's an equitable share. Why should it not have been that once it's agreed that this is the money, without anybody asking, the money just goes to you, just like a salary? Because it is your equitable share. So, it means that even when you look at our leadership have not embraced this thing that we're discussing, still theoretical to them. So when you talk about inclusion, they will give a semblance of inclusion. And that's why you have a cabinet. And if you look at the cabinet, you'll find somebody from the coast, somebody from Eastern Province, somebody from Northeastern Province. You will find that representation. But if the people who have been elected are politicians, believe me, the region they come from doesn't count. They are the same.
So who is it for? So who is it for, off the face of it? Because we're saying that if this inclusivity and if this diversity is shown on the surface, it's not for the individuals who sit in those positions then. It's for the rest of the people who are watching this parade to have a semblance of this diversity and inclusivity. So then is it authentic?
And the person who creates that diversity, as you call it, their selection isn't based on public participation to ask those communities, who would you prefer that I have in my cabinet, or who would you prefer? No. They decide who it is that they want. So if you were to ask the people from whichever region these people come from, do you feel this individual represents you? I'm sure the answer will be resounding no.
So who's it for, Joyce? Purity.
I think it's always it's for the person who's made that choice.
Yep.
Because I think I'll have my personal interest. If I want to push the agenda of the young people of this country, who's better placed to push that for me? And what is my political interest? We've gone beyond not looking at the inclusivity and also just fulfilling what the Constitution entails, but looking at your political cost. If I fail to include this person in my cabinet, how will my political cost look like in that from that political region? And that's why the gender biases also comes on board, because you'll find that the men exclusion political cost is way much higher than women. So what is the political cost of not having women in your cabinet, and what is the political cost of not having men in your cabinet? And what about the young people? So when the parameters are actually brought on the table, you'll have that I must have this person. Unfortunately, that is now where the boundary is also drawn. It will cost me much not having men in my on my table. But you see, the people who perform better, even from the previous government, are women. Because when you look at matters, even the Auditor General reports on corruption and, not corruption, but accountability. Majority of the people who have accountability queries, unfortunately, are the male counterparts,
Is that not because based on what you've just said, that
Yes.
by selection there are more men
Yes.
in it. So can we actually say that women do better based on the fact that there are more men in that selection? It's just going to point to them being more held more accountable when it comes to those things. Would we not be able to flip it and say, if there were more women in the selection, that we could then point towards accountability issues for women because there were more?
Absolutely. And the design of government, even the previous government in this one, like 70% from Uhuru's regime were men, the CSs. But when you go to the technocrats, the people who drive the agenda at the ministries are women. So women are more good planners. They are more the technocrats, the ones who spearhead the discussion at the departments. But the same thing, even what is happening even in this government, the technocrats are women. But you see, as in the face of the ministry is a man. So meaning, even for that woman, as much as she has these good ideas, she has to go through the CS, who's the face of this patriarchal society. So the intentionality, are you basing what will make more meaning to you? Is it meaningful engagement, the people who have capacity, or are you basing on your next political interest?
And this goes back to how we even relate in our families from the very, very, very start, the starting point. Yeah, as a woman, I'm seen as a temporary resident in my home because I will go to my husband in future. And then when I go to my husband, I am still a stranger because they feel like I am not part of them.
But you're not their relative.
Yes. So really the question is, where do we belong? Where should...
The children sort that thing out if you have them. Because the children belong to that community in which you're married. And the children, unfortunately for that community, have you as their mother. So you do have a position you do have a position in a place.
City, it seems like you've not seen women being chased out of their matrimonial homes after their husbands die.
Well, I have.
Okay, so
I've seen women dispossessed.
Yeah, so the fact that I have children still doesn't hold any water.
I've also seen men dispossessed.
Which is very rare.
It is rare, but it happens. The point I'm trying to make is, it is true that the gender balance is important for people to understand that whichever gender you speak of, if someone is trained and has proven that they are able to do a task, they should be given the opportunity. And that's where the inclusion aspect comes in. And in many instances, it has to be affirmative action.
Yes.
Because the socialization that we have in African societies is very male-centric. It's just a simple fact. But let me say this. If you look at data and you look at the progression and the trajectory that women have made in this country, partly because they were discriminated against in many instances. Did you know that up until the 70s, women in this country did not have IDs? They're not allowed to have identity card. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it isn't something new. You couldn't get a loan as a woman. You had to bring a husband or a father.
You could not travel.
All manner of things. Now, that journey and women who've traveled it ended up being far better qualified and far more able than their male counterparts. You know why? Because of what they had to overcome.
Indeed. Morioki has a very interesting question, kind of in line with what I wanted to ask, that when we talk about inclusivity and diversity, we seem to be drawn naturally. We're naturally inclined towards geography. And can diversity and inclusivity not take on a different form when we're talking about governance? Our natural inclination, when we talk about diversity and inclusivity, it goes geographical. So people say that we are not tribal, we've moved on from there, we're not really thinking about it. But our first thought is, okay, if we're going to have a diverse and inclusive government, we're talking about where people are from. But are there not more elements of diversity and inclusivity?
But when people talk of diversity, what do they mean?
What do they mean?
How do they understand diversity to mean? And even when you talk about equity, what do they mean? You talk about inclusion, what do they mean? Because if you were to go to counties, again, as I said, you will find that there are people who feel their government is not inclusive, and yet it's a community that probably share language, and you could argue they even share culture. They'll say, no, this is not inclusive.
It's not all of us.
Is it equal to, no, our region has been ignored. And you talk about a county government that
has brought governance to
yes,
your doorstep.
and it's your people. Okay?
It's quite interesting. Yeah, because the element of inclusivity versus representation. You can be inclusive, but you're not representative. Or you can be representative, but not inclusive. What do I mean by this is the design of the constitution looking further into the governance structure, the county government. The county government was supposed to ensure that, again, we are kind of localizing all the decision, resources, and power by design, the definition of devolution. However, our county governments are made up of different tribes or, let's say, clans. And that is where the issue is. We are from this particular region, but we are 47 or even 48 clans. How inclusive can you go, or how representative can you go? So I'd rather go for the representation way, looking at the different levels. You must have the bare minimum. You must have a woman, you must have a young person, you must have a person with disability. But of course, you must also have a senior person to even mentor the knowledge to transfer the knowledge and the practices. But going beyond inclusivity, because you can have the person with disability, but what type of disability is that? Because they are around 5. That we know. How again are you also going to take care of that? So it has to be more meaningful, and it has to be very sober, and that is why everybody is saying that the president and the deputy president told us that we should pray for them as they think through on how to constitute that team of the CSAs. But for me, I'll also look at the gender responsive indicators, because if that is not in place, if the matrix is not there, then we will really not know the threshold that we can say that we have been more inclusive, or even we've ensured that the different gender parameters have also been represented. Last month, there was a report that was launched on the Kenyan status towards implementation of the SDGs. How far have we conversed ourselves with that report to look at the different gender parameters that the country has put in place to ensure that inclusivity, representation, and diversity was also maintained, to see how best can we also improve this. But for me, key thing will be to ensure that the representation and the inclusivity, it is more meaningful, because you can be inclusive, but the level, the decision, the power positions, it is for this particular sect. So you can be inclusive. You can say that, yes, my cabinet is more representative. Everybody has been included, all the regions, all the ages, ability. But look at the ministry. Which ministries are powerful, and who has been designated to take charge of that ministry? So looking at the power position is also very key to ensure that the meaningful inclusion is the main agenda.
No, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, when I gave the definition of diversity, I said that all demographics are supposed to be represented. Now, when we have members of parliament, and big ones for that matter, always referring to my people from the mountain, it gets to a point where you feel like these regions are the ones who are supposed to be represented, and that's where the confusion comes in, because if you're referring to the people from the mountain, does that include all demographics? Does it include men, women, people with disabilities? As far as I'm concerned, we have 23% of women currently in government, 6% of youth, and only 1% of people with disabilities. So these are issues that we have brought upon ourselves based on the fact that we listen to politicians speaking, and then just by how they talk and only referring to regions, it leads to this kind of
let me ask the question.
disengagement.
There is a politician who has been pointed out as somebody who talks about his region and talks about shareholding.
Yeah.
And he's been blasted and lambasted from very many quarters. And yet that is just about one of the most honest conversations I've actually heard from a politician. Because that's how politicians think.
Yeah.
So are we going to say that because this man dared to speak the truth, do you really think there's any politician who doesn't think of his region? I mean, seriously speaking, since we're discussing this thing, doesn't think of his people as in people who speak the same language as he does? They all do. The reason why we have constitutions and laws is because we know human beings will do things which are contrary to the law, and they will look after their own interests. So you create laws to ensure that they don't, because that creates problems. Now, are we therefore also saying that when one is a politician, one must learn how to lie?
I think that is
away from what they actually believe.
Yes, and then one must misrepresent and talk, because we as Kenyans, and full well that the politicians don't mean we all as Kenyans. It's me and my cabal,
Right.
and the people around me. Those are the Kenyans I'm actually speaking about. But the word Kenyan is, again, inclusivity. It's inclusive. When you say Kenyan, it's
Everybody.
inclusive. Yes, and you encompass the diversity. Okay, and yet the deeds will speak completely opposite to what it is that you're saying.
I don't know the criteria that the political class, the political parties usually use, because I think that is their criteria.
It's actually not complicated. It's not complicated
It's
at all.
literally who's your guy.
Yes.
And it isn't a Kenyan phenomenon. No. Any political entity around the globe, you will find that is exactly what happens. The issue of thanking people for the way they have assisted you with positions, it happens everywhere. It's not unique to this country. We only point it out when we feel we haven't been favored. It's like the way we point out corruption. It's selective.
Yeah.
Corruption that is committed by people whom we have a favorable view towards, well, it's not quite corruption. But corruption that is committed by somebody who has some very dimmed favor from us, that is definitely corruption that should be condemned to the highest heavens.
It is only corruption if it's not favoring you.
This is it.
Yeah.
So here we are. Like I say, we're at a time whereby, for several reasons, there needs to be a reconstitution of a segment of government, and that's precisely the cabinet, whereby there have always been calls. I remember when these CSs that have vacated office were being vetted before Parliament, and those are some of the questions that were being asked. Is there representation when it comes to gender? Is there representation when it comes to geographical allocation? Is there representation when it then comes to political alignment, etc., etc.? So now that whole kit and caboodle is gone, right? And the president and his deputy again saying, ask for prayers to be able to. No, I don't think that. Yeah, sure, the divine will have a place to play here, but then what needs to happen to ensure that these two elements are actually taken into consideration? Because it's right here, it's about to happen. What needs to happen? You gave some statistics: 26% representation women, 23%, 1% people with disability, 6% youth. Now look at that 6% of youth today, and you have 70% of the entire nation's population made up of young people.
Yeah.
Do these numbers talk then about youth representation? And mind you, we're in a place currently where this youth population is demanding accountability from its government. How will these numbers play out to bring in those two elements of inclusivity and diversity? It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Difficult question.
Yeah, 4 years ago I was somewhere, and I was speaking on youth meaningful engagement in governance, and one of the things I mentioned was Because the audience, I was the only young person in that audience. And one of the things I told my parents, who were part of the participants, is that please take care of us. Because if you're not addressing our issues right now, one day you'll not be able to address them. And we will make noise. Then this year is when the young people are actually making noise. Because they have tried to engage meaningful, to ensure that the numbers are revised, to ensure that our voices are more heard, not just being heard, but they are also considered. Our priorities also portray the face of the current happenings globally. But because our meaningful engagement was not had for all that of all those years, how else can we ensure that our voices are now more louder? And that is why the Gen Zs have been on the street for all these weeks. So one of the things that we need to do, I think the pressure is already felt. I can't say that the pressure is not felt. The pressure has already been felt of the young people. Because there's no one in the world, any president who've been able to dissolve his cabinet because of the pressure. And you see, young people have not been part and parcel of this consideration that this group is going to cause me chaos. No. He's also rejected the finance bill. He's also rejected the appropriation bill. Yeah. No president has ever done that. So I think the pressure is already there. And he's more curious and he's more sober to ensure that the coming CSs will be more inclusive and it will be more representative, because he knows if that doesn't happen, then the young people will go back to the streets.
Indeed.
Let me ask, if there's all this representation and inclusivity and diversity is actually applied, so we look and we say, yes, the face of Kenya is represented here, there are a bunch of dodos, what do we do?
Accountability.
No, you'll have people who on the face of it seem to know what they're doing, and he even told they've worked here, they've done this. This thing that we're speaking of, this thing called government running it, this thing is not easy. And most people who get in there assume they understand what it takes. When they get there is when you actually understand whether they understood what they signed up for to begin with. So even as we talk about these things, it's important we look at it. But I think the pressure that has been applied will guarantee that those who have those jobs do their job. Because we've seen people who are very competent take up those jobs and they become
disappearing.
So you actually wonder what happened to this person.
Also, where does prayer come in? Because the Constitution doesn't ask me to pray for the president for him to be able to work. Now, this is where indoctrination comes in, and it's what messed us up even in the previous elections, because we saw leaders going to churches and then churches telling us that this is the person that we have
chosen or whatever
has been chosen, and then we ended up making wrong decisions.
So you're blaming the churches?
So for indoctrinating and brainwashing.
You may be born into a religious family and you attend whatever religious services that are offered by whatever denomination you're inclined towards. But are you saying that just because a political or a religious leader says that this is true, that it is true, just because they have said it is so? We had religious leaders lauding the elections we've had in this country that were flawed from here to high heaven, and they were saying God has spoken. So you wonder which God is this that these people pray to?
Is this God inclusive?
Yes.
That's one question.
Yes. Because if you ask, is there a place for prayer? Yes, there is. It's not in the Constitution, but there is. There definitely is. Those who are inclined towards infinity and believe that there's an almighty God, by all means they should pray.
Then do I hear you saying then that the things that we should be looking at are black and white? that you should not have to have any kind of interpretation as to what decision you should make. That when it comes to then selecting government, or when selecting your representative, it should be a black and white affair. Have they ticked this box 1, 2, 3 for things that we can see, not things that we have to go and seek the divine interpretation for, but things that we can see? Then you should be able to pick, does this person have a clean record? Does this person have a record of proper management? Is this person able to do 1, 2, 3? Is this person worth their those are the things that we should look at. You can touch, they're tangible, you can see.
Yes.
As opposed to, okay, please interpret to me, call Joseph kind of thing. Is that not what then that the elements of diversity and inclusivity come into play? You should be able to see them. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and it's about logic. Do you know what ChatGPT is, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you have interacted with it. Now we have corrupt politician GPT that tells you all the instances where this politician has been found corrupt. Now, why can't we make use of such, for purposes of accountability? Now, so that we don't choose someone based on the fact that he has been chosen by the gods, or we have been told in church that this is the right person. But then we use logic. We actually utilize our brains. That's what our brains are for.
We would hope we would use them.
Yeah, I think black and white, we should not struggle. We should know this is black and this is white, because that is the Utu culture. Because Utu will ensure that you make appropriate and correct decision. Utu will allow you to ensure that the different voices are also incorporated. Utu will also make you to be more tolerant and lower down and calm down and have a dialogue space that is very conducive for everybody to be accommodated. And Utu will also ensure that you are also thinking about the projection. It is not just the current year. Where will Kenya be in the next 5 or 10 years? But Utu will also ensure that the political decision that you are also making are also more realistic. And that is why through Utu, the Utu Chronicles, Uraia has seen fit to now work with the young people and also bring on board the artists, because I think right now is when we've now recognized how powerful artists are. So using art to ensure that we are more aware of what is happening, but also the songs brings us together as a nation.
Is it possible to be completely, well, at least to a large extent, unified, whereby then it's not even a thought anymore? Because unfortunately, it is quite a thought that person in government is either fulfilling a political favor or fulfilling a neighborhood favor. Can we look at then all of this and be satisfied as a nation and say, well, you know what, this is fine. Let's just get about the business of making sure that the country is running and running properly and well accountable. Do you see a time whereby all of these biases, all of these thoughts can be put aside and proper governance can actually take its course? When was Vision 2030 formulated? Because I feel like Utu came as a result of us not realizing what we have put into Vision 2030 and the aspect of that being able to care or think about what other person feels is what led to the concept of Utu, right? So now that we have not been able to realize Vision 2030, even though we have not yet reached 2030, starting to think that Utu is the right direction towards realizing some of these goals, because now we are engaging at a personal level.
How do you practice Utu? And before you practice, how do you get people to understand it? Because for us to talk about it as much as we are, it means somewhere along the line we lost it. And when we had it, what did it look like?
So Utu, you're looking at the bare minimums, because you're placing yourself in that particular situation, and placing yourself in that moment will make you feel how the other person will feel, and that is when change happens. Because when issues are personalized, then you'll make better decision. And because right now, if we talk an example, when you talk about the healthcare in the country, different counties have their respective health schemes, and most of our political class or our leaders in government don't use the public facilities, and that is why they are as in actually they are in the current state. But if we reach a level where we will require them to use the public facilities, maybe that is when they will realize the struggles that Kenyans go through in accessing those services, and they will ensure that they are working, they are more operationalized, and they are equipped to ensure that when they visit that public facility, they are not going to struggle. It's because of the experiences that will make you to be more human. Utu is about being human, because if it's you, how will you feel about that? So, and if your answer is not good, you will ensure that you do better to ensure that your feelings are more positive, or you are in the moment when you use that particular facility or even accessing that service.
Yeah, and Utu looks at empathy. You would not wear a belt that costs 2 million when there's someone just outside your home who is homeless. Yeah, you will look at this from a point of love. Caring for your neighbor. What does this person, how does this person feel? How would I feel if I were in their shoe? Empathy.
So it comes to a value system that we need to add points to. Really quickly.
Unfortunately, when the finance bill was rejected, the first thing that the president mentioned is, I will have to do away with Linda Mama. And Linda Mama is one of the health scheme that has tried to address maternal issues in this country.
Sure.
So our numbers have actually been, we've been doing well, but you see, when finance bill will have to be revised, then women will be the number one casualty. Yes.
It's all stuff to look at, and we go deeper into these conversations, and I thank you for being here. And of course, this conversation supported by Uraia, but it's necessary for us to have those conversations. Ladies, thank you very much. Purity Jebor, advocate for gender justice and youth rights, and Joyce Atieno, anthropologist and diversity champion. Thank you for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.